Hi, everybody. Roxanne Steed here. Look at this hair poking out. Oh my gosh. Um, we'll ignore that. Uh, I've got a fun little video for you today that I'm hoping will be helpful. I think if I had had something like this, if I had had somebody tell me this earlier on in my painting life, it would have made things so much easier. So I'm hoping this will make things easier for you. And that is, how do I get past this fear and hesitancy that I have in my watercolor painting? You know, what keeps me being, tentative and just scared to make marks on my paper. So the thing that I found that eventually got me past that holding back, that being tentative, that fearfulness of I'm going to screw up and wreck this paper, is to just go and do that. Have a piece of paper and some supplies that you are just willing to experiment with and totally make a wreck, and mindfully do some exploration while you're allowing yourself to make this wreck. So I'm going to give you some examples. Let me move the camera down to my tabletop, and we're going to talk about exactly that. So first, I want you to start out with something that you don't, it's like you don't mind making a bit of a mess out of. So one of the things that I love to recommend to my students is this Strathmore visual journal. It's the mixed media version, not the watercolor one. The mixed media one is made of all cotton, and unfortunately, their watercolor journal is made of wood pulp, and they absorb your paint differently. So the price point on this is such that, if you can burn through this stuff and it's not going to cost you a king's ransom to get some great practice time in. So what I recommend is exactly that. Let's get our paints all wet, give them a squirt. Whatever palette you have, whatever paints you have, it doesn't matter. I want you to take what you've got, and I want you to do a little bit of experimenting with. Mix yourself a puddle, and I just want you to make some boxes. Don't worry about getting an even wash, a dry wash, any of that. If you like to have your paper slanted, throw a roll of tape under there, things will run down, and you can experiment with that too. And I just want you to make some marks and patches and experiment with your brush, see what it'll do. This happens to be Princeton Velvet Touch. It's a long round, size 10. I use this probably for most of my paintings, and that's whether I'm working in a smaller sketchbook size. I think this is like 6 by 8, or a regular, I think this is about 9 by 12. So what I want you to try then is mix up some, puddles, and try some of this. While this is still wet, I want you to go in with another color and make some marks in it. And I want you to just let it go. Don't go poking back in there. And on this one, just let it dry. And now I want you to do this again. Make yourself a little puddle, and then do the same thing. And then I want you to go back and poke in there and then see what happens. Or I want you to try to lift it or change it or do something midway through and then leave it alone, see what happens. Because I want you to try out all the different things that you currently have habits on. And I want you to be kind of conscious of what you do. So let's make another puddle. And I'm using yellow in this circumstance. Let's see, I've got a purple here. Let's mix up a little. Actually, it's a nice blue. I think it's ultramarine. Yeah, ultramarine. And, change the marks that you make. You can see all this flow and this swish. It's like an explosion of color. And what I want you to do now is do this again. Now, each time we're going to be getting a little more mindful. I want you to take this same, bit of yellow, and it's probably like milk. It's got that consistency of milk. And now I want you to go and I want you to get a color on here, and I want you to make it really thick, like butter. I want it to be like when you let butter sit out, like a stick of butter sit out on your kitchen counter on a warm day and it gets all mushy, but it's really, it's pretty hefty. It's got some consistency to it. I want your paint to feel like butter, this blue thing. So I'm going to drop in a little bit of butter. And notice it's not running the way that other. So this had more fluid. So I'm going to get some soft edges here, but it's not going to travel as much as when I drop in the blue that was a little more wet. All right, now let's try this again, kind of in a different mode. I want you to make another little square of yellow and do this in about the consistency of milk. And then I want you to get a really runny blue that's got a lot of water in it. See, I'm just dropping in some water into my blue puddle, and it's going to be pretty watery. And then I want you to just drop in, some of these puddles. And then I want you to leave it alone. I want you to see what happens when this puddle starts pushing out the yellow. And you can't go back and poke it around, just let it lay there, because I want you to see what happens when a big puddle of water lays in the middle of your other wash. And I can see on camera as, the time is passing, you can see I'm getting like this little ring of darker yellow. So what's happening is this big puddle is starting to push all these pigment granules of the yellow, and it's making what they call a bloom or a cauliflower. And it's going to continue to change as long as this puddle is wet. So just let it be, just to observe what's going on there. So another thing that I want you to try while you're, getting to get past this tentativeness is just start making strokes. Take, whatever your favorite brush is that you like to use, just start making strokes. Make some strokes on top of it. Drop in like a big color bomb, and as big as you can get, and just let it sit and see what happens. And then pull up some, some more pigment. Let's pull up a nice burnt sienna here. And mix it to, gather up enough paint to make a puddle that feels, like the consistency of milk, not watery like tea and not thick like butter, but kind of a consistency of, between skim milk and whole milk. And then just see what this particular brush can do as far as lines. If you push down, can you make a wide line? If you lift up, can you make a skinny line? How skinny of a line can you make? I'm running off the camera down here. And if I use just my wrist, what do the marks make versus using my whole arm? If I'm pulling from my shoulder, I can make, a much longer line. If I'm just pulling with my wrist, what kind of line does that make? So I want you to try all these different things. Try them with your favorite brush, and then try them with a different size brush. Maybe you've got a little dinky brush that you think is just wonderfully cute. And I mean something like maybe even a size 6. I'm thinking more of a size 4. Let's see if I've got that size 4 handy. Here we go. So something like a size 4, and then maybe even a size 0. And I just want you to try moving paint with a smaller brush and notice your limitations. When I use a smaller brush, I can't, I can't move the same amount of paint without having to go back and dip into it again and again and again. I realized that was off camera. So, it's harder to make a big square because I'm running out of paint really quickly. And so try that with a size 0. This is what I call, and I hardly ever use this little brush. I don't even know why I bought it, but I think I bought it because I thought I had to have it. So if you're using a size 0, you're not going to have enough paint in here to get very far. So don't think you're going to do a whole painting with this, but it's like people make the mistake of using a small brush because they think, oh, then it gives me the control over the little tiny details that I need. Well, you know what? Look at these little marks, and then look at the marks with a size 10. I've got a size 10 that comes to a really nice point. And, I can make some pretty nice little marks with that too, that are every bit as lovely as this size 4 that I'm surrounding. So that were the size 4s. I can make these lovely little marks with the skinny little point of this brush as well. So don't think you have to have some tiny little brush. So, sometimes it's handy, but it is so rare that you need a brush that little. So while you're doing your exploring and making some interesting marks, and now this is still, this puddle is still wet, but I want you to see what dropping that little water bomb in there, is very fluid, where this was very thick and buttery. And so it didn't travel as far. It held its line. It's got some nice soft edges there, but not as soft as that. So I know I had more fluid in that blue and in this blue as well. And so I want you to play around with some of these things where you're dropping in one color on top of another while this first layer is wet. And then on this layer, we took, so all of these yellow squares have, I laid them down in pretty much milk consistency. And the difference is this blue was either milk consistency or, a little bit higher. So it would flow, but didn't go, haywire like this. This puddle where I dropped in the blue, it had a lot of water in it. So the water in this puddle was pushing the yellow granules, and it pushed those little granules out until they make a little cauliflower mark. And so, play around with that, experiment with it. And then what I want you to do, after you do this on some really very inexpensive paper, go to a nicer grade of paper and do it again. And, give yourself a little comparison and see, if I do this on nice paper, how is it going to behave? Oh gosh, I love this paper. This is a sketchbook by, let's see, it's made by Cheap Joe's, and Cheap Joe's supplies this. It's called Kilimanjaro. And again, it is 140 cold pressed watercolor paper. It has a beautiful surface. And I believe, it's 100% cotton rag. So it has, this wonderful consistency to it. So now let's see, let's go in here with some blue that's, it was a little bit buttery when I dropped that in. So it's not going to travel really far. Let's do this again with our another square. Oh, this paper is just so nice. Another square, and then drop in a really watery blue. And just see what happens. See how it's going to just really flow and start moving. But it'll be interesting. And then I want you to take, whatever big brush you have, and I want you to, I've got this big kind of floppy Escoda Versatile brush, and I love it because it's got this long, it's like a long rigger, so kind of long and skinny, and it's got a lot of fluid flecks. And then I just want you to experiment with just moving that paint all over your paper. And then another thing I want you to try is get yourself some clean water, excuse my arm. And I want you to make just a sweep of clean water. And then I want you to drop in some rich color. So let's see, I think I've got alizarin crimson. I'm going to just drop that in and let that travel and watch that flow. And go in on top of it. So just play. I want you to play and experiment, and I want you to see where the water goes. It's the allowing yourself to play on this and experiment and see what happens. And then I want you to try one more thing. Usually when I'm doing demos, I'm sitting down, and most of my students, they're sitting down too. I want you to stand up. And by standing up, this allows you to use your whole arm. And I want you to use your whole arm in making a puddle, and then see how much room that allows you to move that paint around. Let's drop in a little brown on top of that. Keep all those colors nice and warm. So I want you to see just how much, movement that you can get. And don't worry about messing up a piece of paper. I want you to just notice how all this feels. I want you to go back, and then I want you to look at what is the paint doing on the paper as it dries, because the watercolor is going to continue to change. As this dries, you're going to see some of this settle into that surface, that cold pressed surface. Right now, you can see it's still wet. It's got a really high sheen on it. This is starting to dry up here. And again, you can tell if it's dry, if it feels cold compared to a place it's dry, and use the back of your hand. It's more temperature sensitive for whatever reason. It's still damp in there because it's a little bit cooler than that part I know is dry. But anyway, as this dries, it's going to continue to change. So notice those changes. And there you have it, my friends. I want you to just get wild with your paper. Experiment with that. It's going to help you get past that tentative feeling of, oh my God, I'm scared of the mark. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to touch this. It's going to explode in color, and I don't want it to explode, or maybe I do and it's not exploding. So by changing that, the layer of wet on your first layer and what you're dropping in on top, if you drop in color that's wet on top of something that's already dry, you're going to have hard edges. It won't move. So if you're looking for that, something a little more exact where it's not going to flow and spread, wait till that first layer dries. If you want something that has a little bit of fusion, then drop wet into the wet. And there you have it. I want you to experiment. I want to help you get past this tentative feeling of, oh my God, I'm afraid of what this is going to do. And the only way to get past that fear is just to jump in, make a mess, and don't worry about it, because no harm is done. So anyway, thanks. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.